Hello, and welcome to the latest HR on the Offensive Live. Me, Chris Howard. I'm joining you as always on this Tuesday, a wet and grey Tuesday. But we're not going to let that get us down, are we, Debbie Mitchell?
We are not, Chris Howard, because I keep thinking it's Monday and then remembering we're already at Tuesday, and that's a win, right? So.
Exactly. The only downside is that all of the meetings have been constituted this Tuesday, but that's a different story in itself. The story for today that you and I are going to talk about is based on an article which we saw last week. I think you saw it, a few weeks back. And it was in HRDirector magazine. There was a report which an organisation called One Advanced had put together. Now, we won't go into all the details of that report, but the message and the top line of it was leaders are misinterpreting what motivates their critical desk-free workforce. And it was that desk-free workforce thing that triggered the conversation that we wanted to have today, because it's all around this idea of this unconnected workforce, isn't it? And what I wanted to do is just maybe spend 5 minutes today just getting a little bit of your thoughts in terms of the top line, in terms of the differences in how executive leaders and middle managers perceive the conditions faced for the desk-free workers versus those connected, or we call it at least connected and unconnected, don't we? So yeah. I just get a little bit of thoughts on maybe that report, the impact that it makes, how these differences impact overall employees in terms of morale and productivity as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think, the first thing I'd say is if you can dig out the report on the One Advanced website, it's a really good read, actually. And the focus of the report itself is about why deskless, or as we call them, unconnected workers, it can be a bit disenfranchised, and it'll delve into some of that detail. And as I say, it's an interesting read from that perspective. But we were particularly interested in the bit drawn out by the article that we read, which was that there are some really big perception gaps between what CPOs or executive leaders perceive in the workplace versus what those deskless or unconnected workers think. Let's start off with a quick, what are we talking about in terms of deskless and unconnected? This is really your people who are out on the shop floor, who are frontline facing in retail and service industries, for example. They might be drivers, they might be, warehouse staff, those kind of people who are not sat at a desk all day. And the implication of that we have to think about is they're not therefore easily kind of connected to technology. So, they're not getting your daily email to let you know what's happening that day, or they're probably not tapping in on their telephone to find out information or pick up messages. And that has big issues around how you sort of communicate with that part of the workforce, and many other things as well. We did a project a while ago with a client on how you onboard deskless workers, and that's an interesting challenge because you don't have the option to kind of connect with them quite so easily. What I would just say, it's an important point, is that's not a kind of a comment or reflection on their level of intelligence or their interest in work. It's just the nature of the work that they do, and sometimes those two things get conflated. And I think what we were really interested in is, some of the issues where we saw really big differences in the perceptions between senior leaders, CPOs, and the deskless or unconnected workers were around how well people are communicated with. I've seen this sort of throughout my very long career, where managers say, yeah, we communicate all the time with our teams, and the teams go, no, you don't. And that's sometimes the challenge, is that kind of misperception. And it's the same around performance expectations. I believe I've been very clear with all of my team about what the standard of performance I expect is, or I need is, and the team members say, no, you haven't. And that's exacerbated with sort of that lack of technology, that lack of interface. And so it requires a different way of working. There's also things around autonomy, and really interestingly, the importance of pay on retention. So I was interested that, CPOs say it pays just, or CPOs and senior leaders, pays just one factor, whereas your deskless workers are saying pay is really, really important. And actually that's quite key. So the report goes into some recommendations about how you can prevent the disenfranchisement of those deskless workers. We're really interested in, you're creating a gap, because what you're not actually doing is hearing what those deskless workers want to say. and then not giving it, perhaps if you are hearing it, you're not giving it the importance it needs. So to your second question around what is the impact of that, I mean, it has a massive impact on morale and on productivity. So there's a few things. First of all, we know that restless workers are not shy typically in speaking up. We hear that either through their representatives, be those union or workplace representatives. I recall it myself from walkabouts on the factory floor, that you will very often hear people quite vocal about some of the challenges they've got, and what tends to happen is it hits a barrier, hits a block, and so that can be a big challenge. And it's not always complaining, right? So that's the other perception, is they are moaning, complaining, but actually, bearing in mind, these are the people doing the job, they're doing the work, and they very often have ideas and suggestions and things that could make their lives easier and therefore be more efficient and therefore be more productive. And so all of those things become really key. But if they're not being heard, what we've got is lost opportunity for improvement, lost opportunity for greater efficiency. We've got low morale. We may have lower engagement. You won't get as much discretionary effort, because why would they bother telling you ideas if actually you're not going to hear them? And a suboptimal experience for all of those employees. And the result of that is probably at some point going to go. If they don't go, they stay, but they stay in a role that they're not satisfied in, and they're just going through the motions. So you're not really getting the best out of all of that talent. And of course, if they go in an environment like we're in today, where we're struggling for skills and resources and the workforce generally, that becomes an issue in terms of the skills gaps that creates, and the experience that you're watching walk out of the door, as well as the cost of replacing that resource, just to put it in sort of numbers terms. So all of that is kind of the impact of not hearing, I guess.
Yeah, and it's really, really interesting. I think businesses will often think about the cost side of, we're losing this person, it costs us X to replace, but that skills and the experience are the intangibles that are so valuable to businesses. So how do we then get to the point, how do leaders get to the point where they can bridge that perception gap? What do they need to do to make sure workers feel listened to, valued and heard? And have we got any kind of nuggets of best practice or advice that we can give to anybody watching this video?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a few things in terms of bridging the gap. The first one is really about, as we say, they're not shy in, typically unconnected workers are not shy in telling you their ideas, their suggestions, their concerns, the opportunities they see. And so finding ways to capture that feedback and do something with it are the really key things. So that might be things like feedback representatives. So you might have union representatives or employee representatives, but having sort of specific role around feedback for some of those reps will be key, that they are capturing and funneling up some of the key points of feedback and consolidating some of those thoughts from across the deskless community. There's also this idea around sort of what we call skip level listening. So it's not directly to the supervisor, it might be to the supervisor's manager. That might be one opportunity. And the other key thing is use the data. So lots of organizations have got employee survey data. That will tell you a lot of things, but don't sort of just assume that, use that as a core basis. But again, that will really help you to look at some of those core differences between where your deskless workers are perceiving issues or opportunities and where your execs are. I think when you think about an employee listening approach, though, one of the key things is to really think about how you can design that with that population rather than just to do to that population. So, how can you get those deskless workers together and really, just design something that kind of works for them, that they feel is meaningful? And then thinking about how you do that in the context of the way they work. It's not on a phone, it's not on a computer. So what's the quick and, I was going to say quick and dirty, but the quick ways to kind of do that? I think about those things they have in Argos, where you press the button if you're satisfied. It might be as simple as that sometimes, just to get really quick information, posters, supervisor reported feedback, that kind of thing. And then the critical thing, Chris, is always about just kind of closing that gap. So it's no good doing a survey and then not actually doing anything with the information that you've got, or doing something but not telling anyone that you asked what you're actually doing about their feedback. So it's closing that loop and making sure that people really understand, you told us this, and as a result of that, we've looked into and we're going to X, Y, or Z. Now, sometimes that might be we can't do anything about it, or we can't do it yet, but still close that loop and tell them that. And if you are going to do something about it, do that and help them to become part of that design and that solution where you can. Should probably stop.
No, that's really, really good. It's really, really fascinating. I think it's important to make these distinctions as well. Like, many organizations will know this already, but you can't treat your workforce as one homogenized, amorphous blob of an entity. It is different people, different stages of their life, and different interactions and the way in which they interact too. So that's really, really
and the common thing, Chris, is how they are led and managed by their direct line supervisor. We've talked about this a number of times on pods and white papers and all sorts. The kind of the capabilities of the people manager at whatever level in the organization to really actively listen and to know what to do with that feedback. That's the common experience, no matter where you are in the organization, what kind of work you do, is that you've got a line manager, and that line manager can shape how you feel about the feedback that you want to give, and if you've given it, how that's responded to.
That's absolutely brilliant. Debbie, thank you very much for giving us a few moments of your time today and your valuable wisdom, as always. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
I hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to find out more of our live streams, you can check that on our website. If you go to the Insights section, there's a whole host of different bits of assets and content that you can check out. But from myself and from Debbie, thank you very much for listening. And we'll catch you next time on HR on the Offensive live stream. See you later.